Welcome back. The organization known as the 5 Institute released a report highlighting the staffing crisis facing New York City. Employees from municipal organizations struggle with filling over 20,000 vacant positions across the city. Executive Director of 5 Institute, Grace Rauh, joins me to discuss how this crisis could be impacting New Yorkers. Grace, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Now, could we first just talk about your organization, 5 Institute?
Sure. So we are a new New York City public policy think tank. We launched last year in 2022, really as the city was coming out of COVID, out of the pandemic. The founders of our organization, Tom Allen, who's the publisher and founder of City and State, a media organization that covers New York City and state politics, as well as Richard Ravitch, our other founder and co-chair of the board, who's a legendary figure in New York civic life. The two of them and many other New Yorkers who care deeply about the city came together to say, we need a new organization that can really be at the forefront of important conversations about the future of New York through public policy ideas. So that's sort of the history of the group. We feel like we're at an all hands on deck moment for New York where everyone who cares about the city and its future needs to be at the table having these conversations about where we're headed and the public policy ideas that can help get us there.
Now, some of the work that your organization does, that it includes, the report about NYC's staffing crisis or shortage. There's been a lot of drama just about work recently. And so I was really surprised, or I guess not so surprised to see this. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that report?
Sure. So as you alluded to, the world of work has changed, for people across all sorts of different industries. One of the impacts has been that a lot of industries in particular are struggling to get the workers that they need. So this is not something that is only happening in city government here in New York. We know the restaurant industry, for instance, has been really having a hard time getting the wait staff, the people who are in the kitchen, prepping food, washing dishes. We know that hospitals are very short staffed, nurses, doctors, hard to come by. Many schools and school systems across the country struggling to get teachers. So there are some macro level challenges that this city is facing, but how it's played out here in New York is that we have 5 times as many vacancies in city government right now compared to the start of 2020. So there are more than 23,000 vacant positions. There were actually even more, but the mayor and his team cut some of those to save money in the budget. So right now we have 23,000 vacant positions. They are across a whole host of city agencies, but many of them are in some of the agencies that are really on the front lines of delivering services to some of the most vulnerable New Yorkers. So these vacancies are having an impact on everyday New Yorkers.
Now, what could have caused NYC to have this staffing crisis?
So there are a whole host of different issues that have led us to where we are today, which we outlined in our report. Everything from just general burnout, frustration with lower pay in government. One of the key refrains that we heard over and over again in our conversations with city employees and with city managers is the lack of flexibility when it comes to hybrid work. So many industries have understood that the future of work has forever changed as we come out of COVID, and they've allowed their employees, where applicable, to work from home, either full-time or part-time. This administration in particular felt like it needed, or according to the mayor, felt like he wanted to set a very clear example that it was important for people to go back to the office. And so city government workers, regardless of their role, for a while now have been required to be in the office 5 days a week. And so that has created, I think, a real sense of frustration for people who don't necessarily need to be in the office 5 days a week. We know that there are a lot of city workers who have no choice, right? Our teachers, they need to be in classrooms, sanitation workers, police officers, and we thank those critical frontline workers for all that they do. But that's not the case for everyone in city government. And so in our report, we do think that City Hall should allow for some hybrid flexibility for applicable workers. We think that policy alone, changing it, will really help immediately address these staffing shortages that we're seeing.
Now, you mentioned vulnerable New Yorkers, and how these positions not being filled, are going to affect them. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So there are a couple of really vivid examples of this. One has to do with the Department of Social Services. This is an agency that reviews and approves applications for nutrition assistance, government assistance to help people buy food. Normally, it takes them 30 days to process an application. That's considered a timely processing period. Right now, less than half of applications for nutrition assistance are being processed in a timely manner. Just a few years ago, it was close to 100%. So it gives you a clear sense of just how long these delays are. Affordable housing, we're in the midst of a housing crisis in New York. We need a lot more affordable housing. The agency that approves and oversees affordable housing development is facing some of these staffing challenges, and we've seen affordable housing production in the city go down by about 45% compared to just a few years ago.
Now, as we mentioned, failure to adapt is kind of what's causing this problem. And you talked a little bit about, burnout and better pay. Could you just expand on that and how that's, really changing, I guess, the future of work, especially here in New York City?
Sure. So the pay issue is one that has also come up. That's an issue not just when it comes to recruiting new workers, but also retaining them. So we know that the city has been very slow to approve any raises for employees who have been high performers. Let's say they've distinguished themselves. They've been told by their manager they deserve a raise, but then the raise doesn't come. It just gets stuck in some sort of bureaucratic wait list. And then for new employees that city leaders are trying to recruit, there may be an advertised range of pay. Let's say, $50,000 to $70,000 a year for X job, depending on your qualifications. Well, if you're somebody who comes in and you've got all these great qualifications and experience, and you think you should be at the high end of that pay scale, we know that there's been a directive internally that people only offer the lowest end of the pay scale. And that's been a major hurdle. So even people who are highly qualified, have distinguished themselves and want to come in for these roles are getting really frustrated and demoralized when they're told, no, you only get the lowest end of the pay scale. So we think there should be more flexibility given and autonomy given to some managers in their hiring, especially for these critical roles. We are not saying necessarily that all 23,000 of these jobs need to be filled.
Right.
We think they need to be prioritized so that the highest priority jobs get filled the fastest, and that we invest as a city in the highest performers possible to come in and do those jobs.
And I really like that you mentioned, the tactic that a lot of employers will use, like they'll put a really high price range and people will go in thinking that's, something that they, deserve. I can imagine that's really, frustrating to, go into that thinking you could get it. So I completely understand why people are, probably turning away from that. Now, Mayor Adams wants to solve the issue we're seeing with the creation of a committee. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that and what your thoughts on that is?
Sure. So the committee I think that you're referencing has to do with hybrid work. So basically, recently, Mayor Adams and District Council 37, the largest municipal labor union in the city, came together on a labor agreement that calls for an exploration of hybrid work. We applauded this agreement. We think that it's an important step in the right direction. And also, it's the first time that we've seen Mayor Adams show that he is really open to exploring and trying to figure out a way forward on hybrid work. So that committee is going to be looking at how do we actually implement it? The mayor has very rightly raised some concerns he has around equity. He is worried that there are going to be a certain set of city workers, many of the ones we just talked about, police officers, teachers, sanitation workers, who need to be out in the field, on the front lines of the city, day in and day out. Hybrid work is not going to be an option for those folks. Yeah. So he wants to make sure that whatever system is put in place is done so equitably. And so this committee is going to be examining ways that the city might structure hybrid work. And they've set a deadline for themselves of, I believe it's in June, that they want to roll out some kind of pilot program in the city. So we've applauded this. We think it's a move in the right direction. And there are a lot of other cities, I should note, that do have hybrid work in place. So there are different models that New York can look to see how this can work and how this can be most effective.
So we're close to the end of our segment, but I just want to know your organization also offered recommendations. Can you just tell us maybe one of those and what you think the city should do?
Sure. So at a high level, we think the city needs to focus on recruitment, retention, and modernizing government. We think that there should be a chief recruitment officer, a chief retention officer, and then a number of changes, including hybrid work, cutting through bureaucratic red tape when it comes to hiring new employees, speeding up the process, not making it so complicated and difficult to navigate online application systems. Basically, we want it to more mirror the private sector, where people can very quickly find out about jobs, apply for them, and if they're the right fit, they can get pulled in very quickly to do those jobs.
And can you just talk about the next generation? I'm pretty sure that they're seeing everything that's happening now, and I'm almost certain they probably want hybrid work as well. How do we deal with that moving towards the future?
Right. So we think that the next generation of city workers not only is going to expect hybrid work, but also young people are really motivated by the mission of their jobs. And this is an area we think the city can really distinguish itself on. One of our recommendations is that the city launch a marketing campaign to really sell mission-driven careers in government, because we can't think of a better place for someone who wants to give back to their community and uplift it than going to work for the city of New York.
All right. Well, Grace, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
To read more about this report, please go to their website at www.5borough.nyc or follow them on social media at the 5 Borough Institute. Stay tuned. We have more open for you right after this.